Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I can see you popping in. I had to look for a minute. Yay. So we're going to just kick this right off. Good morning, everybody. My name's Brenda Kress, and I'm the Executive Director for the Sacramento Hospice Consortium. We're so glad you're joining us with part 2 of our 4-part series, Grief During a Pandemic. I want to just briefly go over a few things. This is a webinar and not a meeting, so your cameras and your mics are automatically off. We do want this to be a little bit more interactive than our last ones. Our volunteer coordinators really want to hear from you, so they don't want you to have to wait to the end to ask your questions. So I think it's at the bottom of your screen. You should see somewhere where you can raise your hand. If you have a question, raise your hand. You go to the top of our list, and then we'll either myself or I'll introduce my cohort here in a minute. We'll unmute you, or you can also put something down in the Q&A section if you'd rather not speak it, and the panelists can answer it from there. I do want to remind everybody that these are being gifted free because of our wonderfully generous members. Sutter Care at Home Roseville, Sutter Care at Home Sacramento, and UC Davis Home Care Hospice. So that being said, in one of the corners here is my cohort, Joy, and she's with Sutter Care at Home Roseville. And did you want to say a couple words, Joy?
I just wanted to check in. I love the idea that this is going to be interactive. We really want to encourage you to share if you're called to do so. And also, my only request is keep in mind that we want everybody to be able to share if they wish to. So please try to make your comments brief and concise. We want to hear from everybody that wishes to speak while we're here this hour.
And one of the other reasons you get to know Joy is she's also our timekeeper. We're super respectful of time. We want to start on time and we want to end on time. So if you see Joy hop up in the corner, that means whatever section we're on is coming to an end. It's just a gentle, instead of a bell or, waving of hands or a little sign, I used to do that. It'll be Joy's beautiful face. So with that being said, we're actually going to turn this over to our first 2 panelists, and they're going to introduce themselves. So enjoy, everyone.
Thank you. The wonderful introduction, Brenda. Thank you. My name is CJ Noddings. I'm volunteer coordinator for Sutter Care at Home Roseville, and I started volunteering in 1996. I became a volunteer coordinator. I wanted to tell you a little bit about how that happened. And one of the things, as you know, as a volunteer, is that you're called to hospice. And it does happen to all of us. So I graduated with dual degree in health education and gerontology, those 2 degrees. And I got a really great dream job as an adult day healthcare director in a healthcare facility up in Auburn. And after about a year, I was called to go to the hospital. It was Roseville Hospital at that time. And it was a really great job, senior services coordinator, where I was able to do all kinds of wonderful program development for older adults and in coordination with the city of Roseville. And our offices moved a lot because there were just 2 of us, myself and an assistant. And we moved in with a lot of different people. And one time they said, you're going to move in with home health and hospice. So we moved into that office, and I got to know and love the hospice people and the hospice philosophy and everything about hospice. And so I took the volunteer training myself and became a volunteer. And then the volunteer coordinator position came up, and I ended up doing that for many, many years with the senior services coordinator position. And then about 2006, they separated the positions and I became a full-time volunteer coordinator. So really happy to be here and been with Roseville for all these years.
Hi everyone, my name is Melissa Levering, and I am the volunteer coordinator for Sutter Care at Home Sacramento, where I have been the volunteer coordinator for 5 years now. My journey to hospice started, I had a 10-year period where I was the primary caregiver for my father, who had early onset Alzheimer's. Cared for him in a variety of settings through to the end of his life, where we were on hospice. So I was a hospice patient family member, actually with one of our previous members up Sutter Auburn Faith. And at that time, I really understood the importance of hospice, and I really don't see how I would have gotten through that time without it. The chaplain for me was my rock in getting me through my journey with my dad and seeing him through his transition. And so after that, I had decided that when the time came, I would love to be a hospice volunteer. So about 6 years ago, I became a hospice volunteer and really enjoyed the experience. And I happened to have a master's in social work in my prior life. And the volunteer coordinator at the time approached me and needed a partner. And as luck would have it, she picked me, and that was 5 years ago. She has since retired, and I now have a partner volunteer coordinator, Lori Kilcullen, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. We really, really wanted to devote an hour to how you are all doing and hear from you and offer you as much support that we can offer you and really give you the floor. So I'm going to turn it back over to CJ as we can hear from you.
Excellent. So, you know, it all happened so fast. We both, Melissa and I, had flourishing programs. We had many, many patients assigned to volunteers. We both, you know, all of our volunteer coordinators, we also have multiple volunteer coordinators in Roseville. We, you know, we're all busy and just working, you know, with you guys on your cases, and all of a sudden COVID hit. And first it was the facilities, and they just stopped, you know, allowing people to go in other than nurses. Then it was the home setting. And so just all of a sudden, by the end of March, we virtually had nobody assigned to a patient. And so, you know, it was really hard on you and us, and we wanted to ask you, what was this like for you? So what we did is we sent out an email, and I want to thank all of you who participated and took the time to write and respond to the request as how this was affecting you, because it really meant a lot to us. So thank you so much for those of you who responded. And so we're going to just read off some of the responses, and then we're going to ask for you guys to come on and, you know, to give a little bit more feedback about that. So there are 5 questions here, and the first question was the experience of going from in-person visits to phone companion calls. So that was one option we had, was, well, you can continue calling from your patients. So, you know, of course, as you probably know, there are a lot of barriers to that, but we're going to go ahead and hear from you on that. So Marnie responded with a positive one with phone companionship, and that was, I was fortunate to be able to complete phone visits until 6 weeks ago when her condition declined. She was able to hear me through this technology, and it was the next best thing to being with her. So that was one success with the phone call. And Melissa and I are going to go ahead and switch off, so I'm going to give it back to Melissa.
Okay, so the next one that we have is from Christine. There is nothing that can replace in-person visits, where the patient can see you face-to-face and we can hold their hand in silence. Many of these patients cannot speak for a long time, so they are comforted by our presence in the room, a smile or a touch. I read to my patients, and I also sing to them. I am also able to interpret their mood easily by their facial expressions and body posture. Contacting my patient by phone has become a challenge. They are sometimes hard to get a hold of, and not being able to see the patient removes that personal touch that we provide when we are present. The patient is less engaged and doesn't want to stay on the phone. Once we establish a good connection with the patient, our mere presence in the room usually provides comfort to them, even when we are sitting in silence.
Yeah, so that, says so much about how it feels to go from just, being there, even if you're just quiet and sitting, to, trying to have a conversation with someone over the phone, which brings me to Joy's. She had a patient that in person, they had a great relationship, but then when she went to phone companionship, here's what Joy says. The change from visits to phone calls was not doable with my patient in a facility. Phone access to my patient in the facility was unreliable. I rarely reached my patient. My patient has dementia, and even though my patient responded positively on the call on the occasion when I did reach her, I was not sure she recognized my name and voice. I did not expect every call to be successful, but the phone contact was simply a poor alternative to inpatient visits.
I'm going to read an email from Carmen. Really echoes a lot of what we experienced in Sacramento, and we want to thank you for how hard I know all of you tried if you were trying to do telephone companionship. It definitely has a lot of challenges. So Carmen writes, I found this to not work very well with my particular patient's caregiver. He's not much for talking or chatting on the phone, and neither am I. You totally miss out on the human connection of physical presence, eye contact, body language, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, and Valerie, she had a wonderful, it was just such a wonderful assignment. She went out and she colored with her patient. And her patient, even though her patient was non-communicative, her patient would respond with pretty, nice. When I did the in-person visit with Valerie and her patient, as soon as Valerie walked in the room, this patient's eyes just lit up. She completely recognized her. And then, of course, it happened to Valerie as everybody else. And Valerie wrote, unfortunately, this was not an option for her with my patient, as she was not able to communicate or would not really understand who I was on the phone. So that was the biggest problem, don't you think, Melissa, with the phone is if they have dementia, they just, who is this? Who are you, if they don't have a face to connect to? And, because most of the times they don't know what their name is, even if they say what their name is.
Absolutely, and the challenge of having a physical person needing to hand the phone, answer the phone, and give it to the patient. That was even a big challenge.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we see Joy up there, so looks like we need to go on to question 2.
Well, I was going to see, was there anybody from the audience that wished to respond to that question that was brought up, that wishes to speak at the moment?
Did anybody raise their hand?
It looks like we have a message from Colleen, and she said, I didn't have a patient when this started. Starting with a patient via phone without having a relationship beforehand would have been even more difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Colleen, and I totally agree. So the second question is when folks were abruptly not able to see their assigned patient. And, that was just so difficult to have to, let everyone know that we would have to stop visiting. So this is another email or response from Valerie. This was difficult as I didn't get to tell my patient in the best way that I could and whether she understood or not, that I wouldn't be able to continue my visits for a while.
Yeah, and that was hard. And, you know, when this first happened, we thought, oh, this is just going to be a couple months. And now as it continues, we realize this is a long-term situation. So Marnie, you know, Marnie, I'm going to read yours and maybe you could come on after this. Marnie said, I carry a sense of confusion and disequilibrium since I've been able to fulfill my service as a hospice home care volunteer. Our patients and their families have lost the presence, compassion, and empathy of a hospice volunteer. That presence ranges from a daughter having a couple of hours for a doctor appointment or a drive with her dogs, to her mother having my total attention and focus at that time. Marnie, would you like to add anything to that? And you're going to want to turn on your video too. There she is. You're on.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, CJ. So those feelings I have of confusion and disequilibrium and feeling lost are a big part of what part of grief is. And it's kind of cyclical for me. And in the last couple of weeks since you let us know about this webinar and this particular topic, I've been really living it again. For me, hospice work is an active spiritual practice that I've been doing off and on, but wonderfully on since I arrived in this area about 4 years ago. And up to 4 months ago, I had 2 to 3 patients I was visiting each week. And I was thinking about my preparation. So I would drive over, listen to the radio, get to if it was someone's home, stop at the threshold, always stop at the threshold, because that threshold from my world into their world was holy, W-H-O-L-Y and H-O-L-Y, and I wanted to respect that. So ringing the doorbell, entering in, calming myself, letting my distractions go to the back of my head, and entering the patient's world or their room, and paying attention, always being, I've been I was a watchful child, and it has served me well. Looking at family mementos, at pictures, as I heard one of the respondents say, just paying attention to what their body was doing, what their breath was, and having a pause and waiting for if there was a question, a comment, a story. So as I say, it was a special bubble that I entered into, and I miss it so much. I know I'll return to it, but I'm adrift, definitely. Yeah. And also, I was very, very thankful for the Comforting Presence program that Sutter Care at Home Hospice had, where we were at the very last hours of a patient's time on this earth, and offering silence or my own breath to match theirs, perhaps some scented oils, not to touch, but to kind of bring under their nostrils, to offer nature sounds on my phone, or if I knew of favorite songs, to offer that. So it was definitely, it fed me as I know it. It fed my patients and their families.
Well, thank you, Marnie. We really miss you, and hope that we'll all be working out soon. That we'll all be back to our holy. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I have a few volunteers that also had this circumstance that Christine had, and it's just such a hard way when you don't have closure. So Christine writes, I have had my patient for over 2 years and developed a close relationship. She recognized my voice, but she was unable to respond. During this time when I could not see her, it was not possible to communicate with her. She died during this period, and I wish that I could have been there for her and hope that she didn't feel abandoned.
Yeah, that's so hard. Just that whole feeling, it's not just about us, is it? And she really, really brought that out, that this is about a relationship, and just to be torn from it so abruptly.
CJ, this is Brenda.
Yeah, hi,
And
Brenda.
Adrian had her hand raised, so I unmuted her. Adrian, you should be able to
Excellent.
speak.
Okay, hi everybody. Hi Melissa.
Hi, Adrienne.
So I'm with Melissa at Sutter Care at Home Sacramento. So to try to stick focused here on question 2, first off, I am a volunteer who does not per se companion a patient. I've been involved with support to the bereavement department at Sutter Care at Home Sacramento, and also the prime person for music and memory to hospice patients. So to answer number 2, to make that clear, because I don't up to this time companion a patient per se. I have visited patients with music and memory devices and bringing customized music to a hospice patient. So for number 2, this feels like being in limbo for me, because for me it's a sense of not being able to move forward, like staying in place and just waiting, kind of like being in the endless line at the bank, and the bank's line never moves up, so you never get up to the window. It's just being in limbo. That's how I would describe it right at the moment.
No. Yeah. Yeah.
Was there anybody else who wished to share on question 2?
And we do have about 3 more to read comments.
Okay, you might have time for another comment if you wanted to add another one in there.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Joy. So I think we're on Don and Nancy. These are volunteers that what they did was they visit patients with their dog, and with our WAGS program. We missed visiting our patients in facilities. It was disappointing not to be able to say goodbye to my sweet long-term patient, whom my dog and I had been visiting for months as part of the WAGS program. So she lost her patient, like another, one of the volunteers mentioned that the patient died during this time.
Thanks for that comment, Dawn and Nancy. I know this is one of the main reasons we wanted to do this segment for you all, because we're all experiencing a collective grief of not being able to do the work that we love, not being able to be together, and it's really hard, and we wanted to hear how it's been for you. So another similar one from Joy. I experienced a sense of loss when visits were suspended abruptly without having a transition visit with my patient.
And Carmen, she mentions another, feeling of being sorry for the caregiver, that the recreation center that he went to was closed. So basically he said he had nowhere to go. And that even if she were able to start visits again, he was kind of lost as to what he would do while she spent time with his wife. Yeah.
So this is from Gail. For me, the abrupt stop in volunteering and the drastic change to daily life was overwhelming. The uncertainty is scary. I miss interacting with the patients, families, and staff. I also miss the connection with the WAGS group. Our visits were meaningful for me. It felt good to be helping others and having a purpose. I know we're all, really missing this work that's so, deep for us and gives us, so much back. We often say we get more from, being hospice volunteers than, we ever realized that we would get for ourselves. And we know that that's been abruptly taken from many of you. And, we feel you and we hear you and we're with you.
Absolutely, yeah. I've always said to people, if you ever feel down, volunteer. It brings you up right away. Bob said, I always had a routine that I would follow. Once each week, and sometimes more than once a week, I would be programmed to see my patients. It became part of the structure of my life, then nothing. I had to try to send my patient cards because phone conversations with him are impossible. But without any feedback, it's hard to make the connection that I have enjoyed with most of my patients over the years. For me, this is an essential part, knowing that I make a difference in the patient's life and also be there for the family. Bob, would you like to add anything else to that? Bob's been a volunteer of ours for 16 years.
Yeah, I know this.
And it's his birthday today.
Well, thank you very much, CJ. Anyway, this last patient I had, I haven't, over the 16 years, you know that I'm helping patients and families when I visit patients, but there are certain patients that just I connect with very, very strongly. My last patient was one of them. I would go over to the care facility, and I mean, he was up and about. We built things, and we were in the back parking lot. He had a little scooter that he would run around on, but he was one of only about 2 or 3 over the past 16 years that really affected my life in just a very serious way. And I know that when I could no longer visit him, I felt sad for many weeks, and it finally eventually passed, but I still think of him almost daily. And I know that if I was, you know, I don't know what his condition is right now, but if COVID ever disappears and I can get back to him, I know that I'll be a very, very happy volunteer to see him again. I don't think that's probably going to happen because, you know, this is going to long term on this. But yeah, it makes me look at life in a completely different way, maybe because I'm 78, you know, I'm getting there too, so.
Well, thank you so much, Bob, for all the years, and who would have ever thought that this would happen to us this year? But I've enjoyed all the years working with you and hope that we have many more to come after this whole COVID thing.
Yep, hope so.
Thank you so much for your thoughts and your comments. Really appreciate it. And happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Bob, from the Facebook group. We do have a comment or a question from Colleen, and Colleen, you should be unmuted so you can speak.
Okay. One of the things I forget which one of you said about the lack of purpose solidified a feeling for me, and that's a grief that I have in this period, because I always think that when people are going through hard times, having a purpose is so very important. And I've actually been just starting to toy with the idea of like, what could I do as a volunteer for hospice or somebody else from home? So I'm wondering if that's a topic that might be out there, because that's important for keeping healthy mentally, I think.
Right.
Absolutely, Colleen. And Colleen and I were working on a special project that kind of abruptly had to end in what we were hoping for, but we are all, you know, looking and coming up with ways, especially folks that, you know, have pre-existing conditions or, you know, loved ones that are vulnerable at home, and we are looking at, you know, any other ways that we can keep you feeling purposeful and keep you engaged in some way. So stay tuned for some new ideas that we're working on. I'm going to move to this next question. Just I want to make sure we leave time for Sarah, our one of our bereavement therapists at the end here. So the next question is losing a long short-term patient that you felt connected to. So Valerie writes, I've often thought if my patient wondered where I was and why I didn't come for our regular visits. I used to see her every week and color together in a beautiful coloring book filled with pictures of detailed animals. We'd sit side by side and work on one picture each visit. Sometimes she would join in, and sometimes she would say, you do it, and watch me color the picture of a zebra, a lion, a rabbit, etc. In those times in which she watched me color, I'd ask her what she thought of it so far. And she would say, it's beautiful. I believe she recognized me when I arrived because of the huge smile on her face, and when I left at the end of each visit, she hugged me and gave me a kiss on the cheek. She was a sweetheart, and I miss my time with her. That is beautiful imagery, Valerie, and it just reminds me of what incredible work you all do, and it's just really, really touching. Thank you.
Valerie one time one of those photos, one of the coloring book photos, and she put on really large eyelashes on a rabbit to make the eyes pop. It's so cute. Yeah, okay, I'm going to read the next one. And this is from Marnie. I miss playing dominoes with my patient, and she always won. I miss finding and playing favorite Broadway show tunes with my patient and trusting when okay to burst out into song. I miss hearing the stories of her beloved father with my patient.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Carol writes, I have compassion and empathy for the patients, and I worry about it must be like for them to be isolated and not have visitors. I think that's all just heavy on our hearts to think of, you know, how isolated these folks are, especially in, you know, some of the skilled nursing facilities. And, you know, we're working on other ways that, you know, whether it's card writing or perhaps we can get a hold of some tablets and just any way to facilitate FaceTime visits, or we're working on it and it's on our mind. We know that's really hard.
It's so hard for the volunteers, but for the families who've also been isolated from their loved ones. Anna writes, it has been difficult to give finality and closure to the relationship and bond I had formed with my patient. Usually it had been either the death of my patient or discharge from hospice that has given closure to my relationship with the patient. COVID replaced the reasons for experiencing closure, and it has been very different and difficult. One thing that has helped me put closure to the relationship and bond I have with my patient is knowing that she has a strong support from our family who lives locally. And hopefully the family can go in and visit her.
Yeah, right. So Bob writes for this question, when I could not visit my last patient because of the virus, I felt very down for many days and weeks. It has substantially passed, but over the 15 plus years that I've been volunteering, I have had just a few patients that really affected on how I look at my life in general, how precious each day is. This patient was only the third or fourth that have left a distinguishable mark on my life. So when I could no longer visit him, I felt sad. He and I just hit it off from the first time we met. I don't know if I will be able to see him again. If I do, I will be overjoyed. Yeah. Well, we sure hope you get to see him again.
I know. Sandra, she writes, I was visiting CC. I did not like that I could not make one last visit. Even though he did not really remember who I was, his wife said he called me the lady that brings me the cat. I still think he liked the visits. Then he fell and he was bedbound. I feel really sad that I could not go and at least sit with him. It was like an unfinished story.
Hey, lady.
Go ahead, Joy.
I just wanted to check in and see if there were any comments from our audience at the moment. If there was anybody that wished to share, remind you guys to raise your hand or put a comment in the Q&A for us.
I do. I just noticed there was one more sentence on Sandra's. I miss not feeling like I could help or do something for someone. This is temporary though. There are so many needs. Yeah.
Okay. In order to keep in line, are you guys able to move on? Are we ready to move on to the next question?
Absolutely.
Sure. So the next question is not being able to do an activity that brought life meaning. we've touched on this a little bit, but here's some more specific answers. So from Valerie, I've enjoyed being a hospice volunteer and felt somewhat called to it from experiences I've had with family and friends at the end of their lives. My brother was my first encounter with a loved one who was dying. He was in hospice in 1992 with AIDS for over a year, and I was amazed and grateful for the care he received. I spent many days with him there. I believe dying is as sacred as birth. I feel I have something to offer simply by being who I am and being a companion to someone that might not have many days left on this planet. It feels as if I'm giving back in some way. Not being able to volunteer during this time has been sad, but I know it's best for all right now.
Yeah, it's just, Carol wrote, I miss sharing photos and reading to them and the mutual companionship.
Cindy writes, visiting patients gave me an opportunity to help others with no expectations in return, to improve the lives of caregivers as well. Those experiences were now gone, and the effects of giving life more meaning gone as well. A lot of loss right now.
A lot of loss, and it's just so validating to hear all this, that we're all in this together. Valerie wrote, it left a gap in my own life, and I miss the activity and the connection with the agency, and we miss our connection with you.
Absolutely. From Carmen, I missed seeing my patient and spending time with her and knowing I was helping provide relief for her husband. I know that I get as much out of this, if not more, as her husband.
Yeah, very, very tough situation. She's had that patient for a long time. And Bob, he said that, I felt that being a volunteer has done so much for me personally. This is not to mean that other things don't bring meaning to my life. My family, wife, children, grandchildren are all such a beautiful part of my life, but this activity is outside of my family circle. These patients and families are complete strangers until we meet for the first time. Yeah.
Very unique and meaningful work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So from Adrienne, who we heard from earlier, for music and memory, I miss connecting and bringing music in person to a hospice patient. This too is on hold until a vaccine is available or something else happens. As I've mentioned to Melissa, the payoff, fulfillment for me volunteering is providing music personally to patients, as it was before March.
Yeah, absolutely. And Julie says, I really feel sad that I was just about to start volunteering when this started. I have a whole bunch of those. I think it would have been easier if I was already connected. I feel badly that I'm not doing anything for you right now, and I'm not sure what to do. So, and we have a hard time knowing what to tell you, right, Melissa? It's just day by day.
Yeah, it's so, you know, we know the connection with your fellow volunteers is, you know, such a important part of your volunteering as well. And it's just so hard to have our new folks not have had that experience yet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we have Adrienne, and I wasn't sure if she wished to speak. I've unmuted her. You can unmute yourself, Adrienne, if you wanted to add something.
Yes, thank you, Joy. So Melissa just kind of spoke a few of my comments, but in addressing this question, since my primary contact with hospice patients was providing music and memory, customized music to hospice patients, the music they love, the music they know. So I just put it in the chat box, but it picked up the wrong word, not discontinued. I feel disconnected, is the word. Not being able to provide music to hospice patients because the music has been my connection to the hospice patients. And I told Melissa, as her comment kind of said too, my fulfillment comes from that music connection I make with a hospice patient. I so my primary grief having to do with this particular activity, my primary grief response, and it is grief, is the disconnection. So just to fill in a little bit more on that, of course I understand the safety protocols. We're all doing this because of safety. But at the same time, I feel there's a price to pay for these barriers to personal contact. The inability to closely connect with and support a patient, to provide the in-person human connection, to get a smile or give a smile, to hold a patient's hand, to listen, give, or take in response. So I know some of us, a couple of the other participants here have kind of commented in the same type of way, and that's what I feel in regards to not being able to provide music to patients right now.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'm cognizant of our time here. That's probably what Joy's about to say too. So maybe Adrienne just kind of read hers, CJ, that is under this category. So maybe we can kind of quickly read these so Sarah has ample time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next one is not feeling comfortable seeing patients when you could. So Cindy writes, as much as I enjoy visiting my patients and helping caregivers, I was not willing to risk infecting them in any way. In the beginning, when the science was not known and the effect of PPE still under debate, the chance of infecting others, especially ones with weakened systems and constant exposure to their clients, was simply not worth the risk. I stopped visiting as soon as it became apparent that this wasn't just a normal flu or virus.
And Valerie wrote, consider my own vulnerability and abstain from visits even though home visits are resumed.
Diane, the loss I feel now was for the dedicated coordinators and volunteers I so miss seeing. Feeling like you are making even a small difference in someone's life at a difficult time is priceless. The decision to wait to return is one I felt I had to make, taking into consideration the age and underlying issues of my husband.
And another Valerie writes, this has been tough. When things opened up to see patients in their homes, I was not comfortable with that as I've been sheltering in place and not seeing my own friends and family because of the pandemic. So I just couldn't imagine going to people's homes that I never met and didn't know at all, which included their family members. I am also autoimmune compromised, so I need to keep myself safe as well. Totally understand, Valerie.
Absolutely. Jean wrote, it feels weird to not have a patient. It feels like I'm not being helpful. Feels like I'm being lame. But since I'm 73, I have to be vigilant. We support that 100%.
Absolutely. Rich wrote, since the COVID-19 started, I have chosen not to accept any patients. I have not had a patient when this started. I feel bad not to be able to be part of hospice at this time, but because of my age and the possibility of my infecting someone, I feel this is the best way for me to deal with it. I am not sure if there is some other way to be able to help, but for now, I must sit on the sidelines. Rich, you do great work when you can. Thank you.
You do. So Jack writes, this new normal will affect how I will interact with future patient assignments, especially since I am considered a vulnerable person to COVID-19 by age and ethnicity.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to need to wrap up the responses in order to give Sarah a little bit of time to speak.
I just have three more, and just three more, and we'll go fast because this also relates to people who worked in the office. Anna writes, I miss not being able to work in the office. I look forward to coming in every day to assemble starter care packets with the other volunteer. We worked together and that made it fun. Being able to volunteer in the office and being able to connect with the office staff and other volunteers gave me a deeper understanding of hospice.
Go ahead, CJ. There's a gardener here, so I want to keep muted.
Sheila wrote, Sheila's a bereavement volunteer. I'm one of the lucky volunteers that is able to work from my home. One of the highlights of volunteering for me is the camaraderie and the interaction I have with the counselors and the other staff in the office. My main focus, the bereaved, and I feel so blessed to be able to assist them through this pandemic, but I feel a loss as to the social contact that I have in the home environment. And then Kathy wrote, back to volunteering in the new paradigm, not being able to assist them due to social distancing, such as they could and you can't pull the blanket up for them. You can't reach for their water or give them a tissue if they need it. Not being able to touch them on the hand when you leave. Not being able to give a caregiver a hug when they want one. It just feels somewhat impersonal to be in a chair feet away. And that's of somebody who resumed home visits and the struggles with that as well. So those are our comments that we have. And we're going to turn it over to Sarah Hickman, who's a program coordinator for Children's Bereavement Art Group. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and a registered art therapist. And here she comes with some creative ideas of what you could do to get through your grief. Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, CJ, for the introduction. I'm very honored to be here and witness all of your stories and your feedback. It was very moving to prepare for this presentation and to read the responses to these questions. And in my work, I specialize with children's, teens, and families who have experienced a profound and significant loss. They're usually out in the community, but I also work with hospice. And as CJ mentioned, I'm an art therapist. And so that's some of the expertise, so to speak, I'm going to share with you today. The first thing that I want to do is really normalize what you're experiencing as grief. A couple volunteers named it in their writing and named it today. This absolutely is grief. And sometimes as providers, as volunteers, doctors, nurses, or therapists, we tend to minimize our grief when it has to do with patients. We think that, oh gosh, I'm not part of the family, or I only saw them a few times. We think that our grief doesn't matter, or we try to push it away. And so I'd like to tell you that your grief is very important and it matters and it's very real, just as we've been hearing today. One of the ways that is incredibly helpful for coping with grief is art and creative practices. And you definitely don't have to be a professional artist to engage in art making. In fact, we have kind of a joke in art therapy that the artists have a harder time because they're a bit of perfectionists about their work. So a couple reasons why we use art to help with grief is at first to express things that just can't be verbalized. If you ever have that question, as we do every day, where someone says to you, "How are you?" What if you said, "Well, I'm sick, worried, tired, confused, happy, relieved, joyful, and just exhausted"? We don't exactly respond that way. It's not socially appropriate, although I wish it was. And so art gives us an opportunity to express when we're feeling so many emotions at once, which is, of course, as we all know, a common experience, a universal experience in grief. The other thing that art does, that's one of my favorites, is that it gives us a sense of control. Grief and death in particular is one of the most out of control experiences that we have as human beings. And while it's natural and we want to, validate and not pathologize the experience of grief, it can be a roller coaster. And so just manipulating materials gives us a sense of control and gives us those happy brain chemicals that make us feel just a little bit better and improve our well-being. So today I want to share a couple ideas for things that you can do at home. I'm so glad that someone mentioned that, kind of asking for that. The first thing that I have is a project called an accordion book, and maybe some of you have seen these before. But this is a paper folded booklet that I've made. And I'll show you kind of what the base of this booklet is, and then we'll get back to the final product. So this was just a 12 by 18 piece of paper, and it was folded in half and then folded in a zigzag pattern. I've shown here that you can either fold the base up as a little pocket, or you can just keep it blank. And in my example, I went ahead and did the pocket. And this is my cover. I used a small painting, but you could use any image for your cover that you'd like. You just would want to put it on something sturdy. This is watercolor paper, or you could use cardboard. And the idea behind this accordion book is to use the pages to create symbols for memories or experiences that you have with your with your patients as volunteers. If you worked with a patient for a long time, you may want to make an entire booklet just for them. If you've had many experiences and you'd prefer to reflect on those, you could use one page for each. Some examples here are, I used a symbol to express feelings with colors. Another is the memory of hand holding with a patient. Another here could be hearing about their family vacations or the pictures in their family. And here I used the pocket. I just cut out a collage image to represent a patient who liked to travel a lot, and put it right here in the pocket. And this is an example of how you could write a story that they told you. And on the other side, I just have some more of the same, you know, having coffee or tea together, a cutout image of a patient who really loved her handbags. I have an anecdote here of what it was like to visit. So of course you could use this as a journal as opposed to the images if you prefer not to draw. And then finally, my favorite use for the pocket is to put some kind of cut flowers or herbs in here. Many of our patients in hospice used to or currently have gardens, but may not be able to garden. And so sitting together in a garden or talking about growth and plants can be really healing. And so it's nice to put some, you can see my lavender's wilting, but to put this in here. And so what I'll do for the accordion book is I'm actually going to create a document to send to Brenda that she can blast out to everyone via email that gives you some more detailed instruction. But like I said, the point of this project is just to reflect on the memories and experiences that you've had with your patients. The next project that I want to talk about has already actually been mentioned. It's card making. And in our program with the children, we also have volunteers. It's not a hospice program, so the volunteers function in a different capacity, but they also had to cope with the abrupt suspension of their work with COVID. And one of the things that they did was they made cards for isolated folks in the community. And the cards were just positive affirmations. They weren't meant to be get well cards, but more like just things to brighten people's day. And some of the volunteers made 4, 5, 6 cards, and the cards were then distributed by our hospice social workers. And one of the most important things about the card making was that it gave them a sense of purpose and a way to help the community. But we also photographed the cards that they made, and we created a collage and sent it back out to the volunteers in order to connect them as a group. And they really felt like they were part of something together. So not just providing a service for someone out in the community, but also the feeling of working alongside volunteers was something that I got really good feedback on from our volunteers. The last thing that I want to share with you is for those of you that have worked more consistently or developed very deep relationships. I think it was Robert or Bob that mentioned the impact that one of his patients had on him. You may want to consider writing a letter, and letter writing is a big part of grief and loss work. And so I encourage you to, find a quiet space and sit down and write to the person. And it doesn't matter if the person has already transitioned, if they've died, or if they're still living. You can put in that letter, what you wish could have been different, what you learned, what you gained from that relationship. And then when you're finished with the letter, and I will say it can take a lot of time, so be gentle with yourself, but when you're finished, think about a ritual for that letter. Would you like the letter to be close to you and to have it be sealed? Or would you prefer to let it turn to ash in your fireplace, or perhaps to read it out loud to a neutral friend or a therapist or colleague? Right now, with everything being so uncertain, we are desperately missing ritual. And so the idea of the letter writing is, yes, to express feelings, but also to create a grief ritual for yourself to help you honor the loss. So I'll conclude by saying that I know that art making isn't for everyone. So I encourage you to engage in any creative practices, whether it's movement, dance, writing, just being silly, anything where you're getting, or music, poetry, anything where you're just getting your creative juices flowing. And that can really, really help express the suffering and the pain of grief. And the goal of expression is not to find closure, right? Closure is a controversial term in the bereavement world because it gives grievers really unrealistic expectations about what is ahead. That roller coaster that I mentioned, if we talked about closure, I'm kind of denying the roller coaster that is grief. But our hope here by using the creative arts and expression is to find ways to have peace and to make peace with some of the things that have happened and to bring peace into your life. So I hope that just the few things I've suggested today, send you further on that journey. And I just want to thank you for being invited to be here today.
Hi again. I wanted to add, there were a couple of comments that folks had made while CJ and Melissa were speaking, and Laura, she says that she's from Woodland. She's a counselor and a mom whose baby was on hospice. 7 years later, she's wanting to give back to those who are struggling with child loss on top of this pandemic. And she said she's been participating in a variety of ways with things like these trainings to start grief groups, and also it sounds like she's been learning via Zoom to try and kind of give back. So bless your heart. I think that a lot of people who enter the field of hospice have had some sort of loss, and that's kind of their focus as well. So I apologize. I'm sad for your loss. I grieve with you. That's an incredible loss. But thank you for sharing. I also wanted to. There's now a bunch more. You guys have been talking a lot. So I may just be able to add one more before we have to wrap up here. But it was a happy birthday to Bob. And a thank you. There was also some thank yous from folks for having this. So something that I want to let you all know is that if you're finding that you need kind of a group, even just to have this social interaction, to have this kind of bonding and processing time, let your bereavement or your volunteer coordinators know that this might be a need, and we'll see if we can get some of those needs met for you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Joy. Thank you for all your help today and all your wonderful words of wisdom. And on behalf of the Sutter Hospice, I'm with Sutter, the Sacramento Hospice Consortium, on behalf of the consortium, who includes members UC Davis Hospice, Sutter Sacramento, Sutter Roseville, we'd like to thank you all for being here. We hope that this hour helped validate some of your feelings and notice that we're all in this together, and together we can help one another. So thank you all for being here, and hope to see you soon at the next session, which is coming up on August 13th. Thanks again. Take care.